Night 4 of Youngbloods Collective's Speak Week. Here we go. Visit the links below to view our entire event schedule, read performer biographies, and donate to our cause. So far, we've heard from Rachel and Megan. Tonight, we continue exploring the influence of motherhood with Therese's story.
And then there's the mothers who may not have carried your body inside of theirs, but who definitely gave you a place in this world. Adopted mothers, grandmothers, aunts, the sister that raised you, moms of fur babies, mentors, your best friend's mom, the teacher that you once called mom on accident. We love to put motherhood on a pedestal. There might not be one perfect way of being a mother. There might not be any perfect way of being a mother. They're often the first leaders and teachers in our lives. Who but your mother has a certain frustrating power over you? Some moms teach sacrifice. Some moms teach how to stand up for yourself. Some moms teach humor, humility, devotion. And there's plenty of mistakes to make along the way too. Other times, mothers teach us fear, volatility, insecurity. And, as Therese Bartholomew is here to teach us, some moms are assholes.
So I am super grateful to join you guys virtually tonight. Being a mom has influenced every critical decision in my life. Who I married and who I divorced, where I lived and where I had to leave. It simultaneously drained me and filled me up. In the spring of last year, I went to the doctor for an annual visit. My doctor asked how I didn't feel it, how I didn't notice it there, the grapefruit-sized growth that was on my uterus. I had no real response, just stared at the screen and remembered peering at a similar one years and years before to listen to my first baby's heartbeat, or to guess the gender of the second, or to just stare in awe that there was this little human residing inside me. But now, it was a grapefruit. The doctor moved the wand and stated that intercourse must have been incredibly painful for me. I responded without any hesitation that since the separation, my lady parts had seen very little action. I did tell her, though, that I was open to it if she knew anyone who might like to remedy that. She did not answer me, and I realized after that I had just asked my doctor to be my pimp. So I left her office and I sat in my car just crying. My surgery was scheduled for 5 weeks out. I planned it around my birthday, thinking I might like to turn 52 with the uterus still in my body. Now, don't get me wrong, there was zero chance in hell I was gonna pop another baby out. Although, kudos to all the late in life moms who do that. I think it's incredible. Just no thank you. So usage was not the point. I think maybe it was more about losing this part of me that had created these pieces of me. It was a symbolic removal. It was a literal fucking removal. Until recently, I prayed my mom would be diagnosed as, well, seriously mentally ill. I desperately wanted and want to justify her behaviors. I want some room for grace. But in the end, she may just be an asshole. It was about the time that my boobs grew that it was revealed she did not like me. Don't misunderstand though, it took years of therapy to unpack that tidbit. It took words and lack of them and events and moments adding up over time. It took growing into my own skin. Hell, it's still taking. The boobs weren't the threat, I don't think, as much as the voice that seemed to accompany them. My mother preferred a male voice over a female, unless the female voice was her own. At 13, I was in my first abusive relationship, accompanied by my first consensual sex. The sex was in the woods behind my boyfriend's house. I did not like it, and I'm sure it was not really for me to like anyway. Yes, I was for sure destined to be classy and pregnant. So that first boyfriend, and helped many to follow, was not near as broken as my mother's heart when I dumped him. You see, she was invested. She had taken us to Olin Mills Portrait Studio in the Tryon Mall for pictures on our confirmation. She believed I would marry him when we graduated. I did not marry him, and I did not graduate. At 15, my second boyfriend moved in with us right after he graduated from high school. He had nowhere else to go, he had told my mother, and he wanted to marry me when I graduated. My mother had said, very sternly, no hanky-panky when he moves in here. Now, there was, surprisingly, not surprisingly at all, a large amount of hanky-panky that took place. She took us to Olin Mills Portrait Studio for pre-engagement photos when I was in the 9th grade. I had a tiny ring and I had no plans for college because the plan, you see, was for me to graduate from high school and be a wife. That was supposed to be enough. I broke up with him at 16 and my mom did not understand why. He still came to our house for dinner on Sunday afternoons, and I told her I did not like that. She told me that was too bad because we were his family. She had invested a lot in Olin Mills and a lot in my boyfriends. So the portraits sat prominently on the fireplace mantle, a constant reminder of how I had failed her. When I got pregnant in the 11th grade, I was more shocked than my mom. The Pope had said I could not use birth control. The Pope had also said I should not have premarital sex. My parents had banked on my following both of those tenets, but 1 out of 2 for a teenager seemed enough. Evidently, it was not. The father at 20 did not want a lot to do with that, so I was on my own. My parents were pro-life, so it was like they had their own little Virgin Mary right at their fingertips. The virgin part for sure is a stretch, but you get the gist. My parents were heroes in their circles. They were living out their faith. I was a source of pride, the pregnant teenager they stood by. Some girls did not have it so good, I was told. My parents were patted on their backs and prayed for by the church. I was walking shame, and they were loving me right through it. I prayed the rosary a lot because I knew for sure I had hell lurking somewhere in my future. My mother dog sat for the guy who had knocked me up. I told her I did not like that, and she told me that was too bad because she still liked him and his dog. I cried a lot, and I knew prom was out of the question. It seems most high school boys don't want the pregnant chick in their prom photos. So the taffeta gown hung plastic covered in my closet for almost the full 60 days, allowed for the return. When I returned it to Belk, I exchanged it for 2 floral maternity dresses. Now these dresses can only be described as moo-moos. Appropriate because on bad days I looked, well, like a baby cow, and on good days I looked like an over-iced cupcake. When I went into labor, I went all natural. I'd made that decision because at the time epidurals were still, pretty sketchy. I thought maybe paralysis would be a punishment for this mortal sin of premarital sex. I also feared my baby might come out drugged up. Honestly, though, I wonder if I didn't maybe choose the pain to somehow rid myself of that sin. I prefer the former explanation, but am hardly opposed to unpacking the latter in therapy in years to come. So at 17, I took home this little gift that I had no idea how to care for. She was beautiful and perfect, and even though she cried through the first few months straight, I adored her. I slept with her bassinet right beside my bed so that I could drape my arm over the edge and have my hand on her back to feel her breathing through the night. I married when she was 8 months old, not to the father, but to another man who had told me how lucky I was that he accepted me with a child. I felt lucky, so I married him. I had a second child and I got divorced. Turns out maybe I wasn't so lucky after all. I was not a great mom. Hell, maybe I wasn't even a good mom. But to these two little people, I said, I love you every single day. And to these two little people, I repeated, you can be anything. Even though on most days, I knew I was destined to be nothing. Now, in the most recent shenanigans of my mother, and y'all, if your therapist looks at you after one more story involving meth, a pile of money, and a dog bite and says, how are you not white trash? Well, it's unquestionably shenanigans. I contemplated her death. Not my therapist, but my mom. Wait, let me rephrase that. Just in case my mom happens to go missing, I contemplate the relief I will feel in her death. As if a part of me that I no longer need is being removed. It was only a few years back that I stood with my middle daughter in front of the casket that held her biological mother. I had shopped for hours for a dress for her mom the day before, and I gave up because dress after dress, I was determined that nothing was good enough for her. I wanted her to feel pretty. I wanted her to look pretty, even though not one part of her was capable of feeling anything. She had been numb for a long time from the drugs. The casket, though, would be the first time the 4 kids had seen their mom in almost 5 years. She had left them very much unfinished. She had left them to me. She lay in that casket in a dress my friend and my oldest daughter had found after I called them crying from the mall. Her fingertips were stained mustard brown from cigarettes. Her hair was brittle, her skin was grayish and bruised and far too old for her. The dress did not help that one bit. Her daughter, my daughter, stood shaking with guilty cries in her teenage mind, believing she had been the bad guy. She had been the one to tell us about the drugs. She was the one who wanted a different life for her and for her siblings. She was the one who had grown boobs and a voice and a fucking threat. Now, I vacillate on my beliefs around the hereafter, but my hope is that we all get this one aha moment. So it's not about guilt or punishment or any such thing. It's about realization, understanding, and compassion for our gone selves and the selves we shared for good or bad with others. So I wrapped my arms around my daughter and I said, now she can love you with a mother's heart. I closed my eyes and I imagined my own mother dead. My mother still doesn't get me. She hates that I'm educated and believes I see myself as better than her. She's disappointed when I say things like, I left him because it was unhealthy, or I'm taking care of me. My mother calls me a feminist like it's profanity. She reminds me that life is about suffering and not about being happy. I know she's not afraid to be the catalyst for either of those things. She's not believing therapy unless the therapist tells me to make do or to be content or to accept my place. She doesn't understand a therapist will not say that. But here's the thing. In literature, even the worst villain has some redeeming characteristic because humanness is complex. My mother loves the vulnerable. I can't judge the sincerity of that love, though I admit I would really like to. But I can say that the less vulnerable I was, the more she seemed to resent every part of me. She prefers people who need something from her: care, money, a place to live. Those are her moments to shine. She cares for drug addicts not in a way that will benefit them, but in a way that will ultimately benefit her, in a way that will fill a void or hug a child spot she has not healed. From the outside, though, my mother might even appear, well, saint-like. Ultimately, her need to feel important or loved or necessary brought the homeless, convicts, addicts, the fill in the blank with down on their lucks into my childhood home and into my life. She didn't see my vulnerability or listen to the voice when I told her this one or that one was stealing or touching. She excused it or she justified it. She saw herself as a good Christian living out her faith, the same faith that had silenced me. But you see, the power comes from understanding and from acceptance, both still works in progress for sure. The power comes in the choice, a choice to use this example, flawed and maybe misguided, of giving, of compassion, of concern for my community, to be someone different. A choice to accept lessons learned in the absence of teaching are still very much lessons. Some mother taught me to love without barriers. I give when I don't have it to give. I see my community and my world as my problem and my responsibility. I see humanity in the addict, the convict, the underserved, the underdog, the fill in the blank down on their luck. I do not, however, do that to the detriment of my family. I'll be honest, sometimes I do that to the detriment of myself, but we'll unpack that in a different show. I learned my own strength and resilience. I learned to celebrate women with voices and educations and paths that fulfill them, and I am not even a little bit threatened by their tits. And God, I pray that my middle daughter, hell, all of my daughters, are stronger and smarter and better than me in every damn way. I pray that she has sticky notes all over her house for the days that she needs reminding, I am enough. I pray the little boy growing inside her will someday raise a daughter who is stronger and smarter and better than the women whose stories live inside her. And I know someday I will shop for the dress for my mother to wear in her casket. And I may fail and need to call in reinforcements because nothing will be pretty enough for her. And I know that my mom, in her hereafter moment, will say, aha, and see me and get me and love me with a mother's heart. Thank you.
Join us tomorrow at 7 p.m. for our 5th night of Speak Week with B. Torres and her piece titled The Land of the Living. Tonight, we give special thanks to our sponsor, Advocates of Routt County, whose mission is to support and empower all people impacted by sexual violence and abusive relationships, while disrupting all systems that tolerate and perpetuate such violence. Thank you to all of our supporters. To learn more about our organization, please visit youngbloodscollective.org.